What is happening, guys? Today I have kind of a quick video showing you 3 modifications that I make to my bucktails that definitely put a lot more fish in the boat. Now, I guide down in southern Wisconsin, and a lot of the waters that I fish and guide on get a lot of fishing pressure. And I'm kind of a believer that these fish sort of get educated to a certain degree. They see tons of the same baits over and over and over again. So having something that's different, that's gonna stand out, really makes a big difference getting these pressured fish to eat. So that being said, we're gonna jump right into this. We're gonna keep it short and sweet and get right to the good stuff. So the first modification that I'm gonna show you guys isn't really a triggering mechanism. It's not something that necessarily changes the bait a whole lot, but it is gonna change your hooking percentage, and that is upsizing your hooks. This is a Esox Assault single 8 bucktail, just got a single number 8 blade on it. Real small, compact bait, and this is one of my favorite, absolute top producing baits, not only for myself, but also for my customers. Now, that being said, most bucktails right out of the package, right from the manufacturer, work just fine with the hooks that they have. However, anytime you can get away with putting a little bit bigger hook on your bait, something with a little bit wider hook gap, a lot of times you're going to increase your hooking percentage. And of course, with muskies, you only get so many chances at a fish. So maximizing your ability to hook fish is really critical. So a really simple modification that I make as soon as I get one of these is I pop off that stock hook. I don't know if that camera is going to focus or not, but I take off that stock hook and I upsize it to this guy. This is a 5/0 Eagle Claw, and it's just a little bit bigger. And when I say a little bit bigger, I mean just a little bit bigger. And you may not even really be able to see that in the camera right now, but it's a tiny bit bigger, and I've noticed that my hooking percentage on that bait has gone up quite a bit, almost probably close to 25% overall, upsizing that hook just a little. And I also do that on my bigger baits. This is an Esox Assault single 9 bucktail, and I took off the stock hook, which I believe is about a 5/0, and I replaced it with a 7/0. That is a big old hook, but if you look at this thing, that's a pretty big bait, especially for something that has only a single hook on it. So again, the hooking percentage went way up when I started making that modification. And that'll work on just about any bucktail. As long as it doesn't mess with the action of the bait, which it seldom does being a bucktail, go ahead and upsize your hooks. Now, you might have noticed those 2 baits that I just showed you had something in common. They're single blades. I really like the triggering capabilities of a single bladed bucktail over a double bladed bucktail. Now, that being said, double blades do work. However, again, fishing really pressured water, most people throw double-bladed bucktails. So when other people zig, I like to zag, and I like to throw single-bladed bucktails. So our next modification is going to be taking a double-bladed bucktail. This is a Mini Juice by Big Tooth Tackle. This is an awesome bait. It's a pretty long bait for having just a single hook, but it's got a big old single hook on it, marabou, couple of Mag 8 blades, and we're gonna take this thing apart and turn it into an absolute killer for pressured water. So to convert this down to a single blade, obviously is really easy. You just cut off one of the blades. This is something that I would definitely do with bucktails that you maybe just have laying around, something that you haven't caught very many fish on, or something that maybe you don't have a ton of confidence in. Don't go out and buy a bunch of $20, $30 bucktails and cut the blades off. But if you're not looking to go out and buy single-bladed bucktails and want to work with what you have, just taking a cheaper bucktail apart is a great way of doing it. Not to say this is cheap. This isn't a cheap bait. But if you have stuff laying around that you're not really using, those are great candidates for making this modification. The only tool you're going to need to do this is Nip-X. You should own these if you're a musky fisherman for cutting hooks, making bait modifications, etc., etc. Get Nip-X. I definitely am not sponsored by Nip-X, but I will tell you that of all the hook cutters out there, these guys are definitely the best. They work great for bucktail wire and pretty much any small gauge metal. So we're gonna trim this thing up real quick. A lot of people, when they cut clevises off, they just cut the clevis and they leave the little pieces of metal with the hole in it still on the wire shaft. I am really not a big fan of doing that. I like to just take the thing completely off. So what I'll do is take the very tip of my Nip-X, put it straight up against the wire shaft, and I'm gonna snip right in the middle of the hole that attaches it to the wire shaft. I'm gonna do it again with the bottom part of the clevis, and ta-da, we are down to a single blade. So now with that blade removed, you'll see when I spin this thing, it wiggles all over the place, and that's because this thing's built on a really long wire shaft. And I've noticed, not just the big tooth baits in particular, but a lot of bucktails, when they're built on a really long wire shaft and you trim it down to a single blade, these things have some crazy wobble. They throw a ton of vibration, they move a ton of water, and these things become absolutely deadly, especially when you're targeting really pressured fish. One of the baits that I did really well on this last season was that exact same bait in black nickel blade. I did go ahead and add another hook to the front of the bait here, a 5/0 eagle claw. Did the old double split ring trick there between these two beads. I've got it right tight to the hook because I actually did quite a bit of fishing after dark with this thing, and I like having a blade fairly close to the, a hook fairly close to the blade when I'm night fishing, because it seems like the fish definitely like to attack the front of the bait. And you'll also notice I also keeled this bait because it had a kind of a tendency to roll because of how much thump this blade has. And if you haven't already, be sure to go check out the video on the Angling Anarchy YouTube channel. Brian Scaife, good buddy of mine, he has a really cool video about tuning bucktails and tuning rubber baits. So if you want to learn more about keeling them and things like that, go check that video out. All right, now the third and final modification I'm going to share with you guys is this. This is the ticker attachment modification. Now there's a few companies out there that are building bucktails with a standard ticker attached to it, and all that thing does is it makes a little bit of noise. It's a little piece of bucktail wire. I'm going to show you guys how to make this. It's attached somewhere to the front of the bait, and when the blade spins, it hits it, and it makes kind of a clicking sound underwater. Now, for a long time, I didn't really believe that something like that could make a really big difference in getting fish to eat, especially something like a bucktail. However, this particular bait, this is a Lee Lures mini Boilermaker. This was brand new at the start of last season, and I built one with that ticker attachment, and we had a few others identical to this bait. Same color, same size, absolutely same everything. Fish side by side, and this bait outfished all the other ones almost 10 to 1. This particular bait caught 13 fish last year, and that's under different conditions all throughout the muskie season, starting in spring all the way through fall, having different people fishing it, and it outfished pretty much all the other ones. And again, being built absolutely identical to all the others, and this one got absolutely murdered. So that ticker attachment definitely had something to do with making this bait a little bit different and getting more bites. Now, that being said, it's not unique to this particular bucktail. You could do this to pretty much any bucktail, and I have done it to multiple other bucktails, and it has seemed to kind of increase the interest from fish, especially when there's a lot of pressure, and especially when people are throwing lots of bucktails. So I'm going to show you real quick how to bend up your own little ticker attachment with some basic tools that pretty much everybody should have laying around, especially if you're a muskie fisherman, and let's get right into it. So to begin building our ticker attachment for our bucktail, we need just a couple of things. The first of which being a pair of round nose pliers. This happens to be Nipex brand, and these are oftentimes referred to as jeweler's pliers. And they have the round nose instead of a traditional needle nose plier. And they make these in a few different sizes. I prefer the short and stubby version over the longer version because I feel like you get a little bit better grip on the wire. And it seems like the longer nose tends to be a little bit flimsier on some of them, so I like the stubby little guys. And of course, our trusty Nipex cutters, hands down the best tool for cutting bucktail wire and hooks or miscellaneous other metal things, so we're going to need these. And we're also going to need some bucktail wire. I usually have either 051 or 063 wire just kind of hanging around if I need to rebuild a bucktail, but they work perfect for this ticker blade attachment as well, and you can get these just about anywhere. I get mine at Lure Parts Online. Now, deciding on which size of wire to use, whether it's the 051 or the 063, kind of depends on the bait. Every bait's going to be different. Now that particular bait, that Lee Lures mini Boilermaker, is made with a single number 8 blade, and it's a very light blade, and I was able to get away with using the 051 wire to make that thing work. Now if you were to do this on a heavier bait, like a double 9 or a single 9 or a single 10, something like that, you're definitely going to want a little bit heavier wire, and that's where this 063 really comes in. Something that's going to have a little more weight that blade can kind of smack into and make a little bit more noise. Now that being said, this is kind of the fun part of doing this. You get to play around with the different wires and different bait configurations to figure out what's going to work best for the particular bait you're trying to add this attachment to. All right, so to make our wire bends, I'm going to try and do this over my shoulder so you can actually see how I'm doing this from my perspective. Since I'm filming this by myself, I don't have anybody to hold the camera for me. We're going to try to do this over my shoulder. So to start our ticker attachment, we're going to need a wire shaft. We're going to make this one out of 051 wire and our round nose Knipex pliers. We're going to grab our wire probably about 3.5 inches away from the end, so we have a little bit of tag end to play with. And the first bend we're going to make is back towards ourselves. So we're going to take our wire and bend it back just a little bit. We're not going quite 45 degrees, probably just shy of 45 degrees, but you want your bend to be right about there. Now going forward, we're going to take our tag end here, grab it with our fingers, push it around the top of our pliers. So now we have this bend, kind of similar to like a bottom bouncer. If you look at a bottom bouncer for crawler rigs for walleyes, very similar to that kind of a bend. So we're going to grab that in the same spot again with our pliers. We're going to take our fingers, put it on that tag end again, just like we did when we first bent that, and pull it down just like that. So now we have a loop. We're not going to close the loop. We're going to leave that open so we can attach it to the bucktail. Now depending on what bait you're putting it on, you may have to play around with where you actually attach it to the lure. Sometimes you're better off attaching it to the wire shaft itself above that bead that sits above the clevis. Other times you're better off going through the line tie of the lure, and that's something you'll have to play with. Every bucktail is different. This can mess with the way that the blades spin. This thing could get stuck on your snap, on your leader. You got to play around with it a little bit to figure out how to do this. Now on these single eights, it works really well just to put it on your line tie. This has a really big line tie on it, so it plays really well with this bait. So we're going to slide it on. Maybe. Let's see. There we go. Now we've got it attached. Now we're going to finish our wire bend. If I can find my pliers. I'm sitting on them. All right. So now we're going to take our pliers again. We're going to grab it right there. We're going to take our wire, pull it kind of towards the top of that loop we just made, and bring it straight down. And I'll take it all the way back around to the other side. And there we go. That's pretty much the perfect wire twist. So we'll take our Knipex, get right tight to that wire shaft. Bam, we got it. All right, and that's pretty much it. Now, obviously, the bait's not gonna run with 11 inches of wire hanging off of it. And this is one of the kind of critical parts of putting this ticker attachment on, is figuring out the length for the desired bait. Now on this bait, I'm gonna cut it to probably about 2.5 inches. And we're gonna start there. The important thing to remember is you can always take it away, but you can't put it back on. It's just like carving a piece of wood. So start with your wire a little bit long. If it's too long, like this one is, it's kind of getting caught on some stuff, trim it. And usually this is gonna require on the water testing to make sure it runs right. There we go. Now we're partying. I took about 1/2 inch off of that ticker wire, and now it seems to be working a little bit better. Obviously it's not in the water. You got to run this in the water to figure it all out. But that, in a nutshell, is how you make a ticker attachment for pretty much any bucktail. And there you have it. Those are my top 3 bucktail modifications. They're really simple. They're things that anybody can do with minimal tools, minimal equipment, and they really do make a difference, whether it be upsizing your hooks, cutting off a blade, or adding some kind of a noise maker to your bucktail. They definitely are things that will get pressured muskies a lot more interested in your baits. So with that, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully you found it useful, and we'll see you on the next one.